Good morning. My name is Marlise Singh, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees here at Mainline Unitarian Church. Not on? My name is Marlise Singh, and I am a member of the Board of Trustees here at Mainline Unitarian Church. I welcome all of you here in the room and watching remotely to our service this morning. I'm joined today by our worship team led by Terry Dixon, our lay leader, and the other members of the team are Dawn Star Sarah Sporschelt, our Director of Lifespan Faith Development, Kathy Landy, our worship associate, and Danton Arlotto, our musical guest. A special welcome to those of you who are visitors here. Please join us for refreshments and conversation in the fireside room after the service, and check in at the welcome table in the atrium, or look at our website at mluc.org to find out more about us. We are Unitarian Universalists. We affirm religious freedom and celebrate diversity. We are a caring community united by our values rather than our beliefs. We join in a community of faith to transform our lives, care for each other, become our best selves, and build a more just, compassionate, and equitable world. At this time, our board president has an announcement to make.
Good morning. Are you enjoying the spot of the month arrangement? Do you like it? It's a great idea, isn't it? It's not mine. If you see Jess Michael, let her know that you're liking this. I have an announcement today. I'm taking some time from Marlise to announce an opening on the board. Madeline Seiko has moved on. She's not dead. She's right here. She has accepted our membership coordinator position, and so we have an opening. We look forward to getting to know you, Madeline, as you get to know us. Yeah. So this works a little differently. I've been on the job for a month. We have an opening. Coincidence? This month it is. Give me time. So this works a little differently when we're filling a board position mid-year. It doesn't go through the nom-com like it usually does. Usually there's a slate and everyone's combined, and let's say you wanted to vote for Barbara Colton to be on the search committee, you got Craig Farr too. There's no separating the slate. You can't. That's a problem. But with the board, when we're filling a position like this, it's a little bit different. So we vet you a little bit differently. Some things to consider if you're considering this. 4 things. Be kind. Board work is not for everyone. If you have a willingness to do this, but you don't have the time, we appreciate it, but just say no, because it will turn into resentment, and you'll be angry, and you'll leave the church. And there are a lot of reasons to leave this place, but board work is not one of them. Second, it'll disturb your peace of mind if you really find that it's encroaching on your time and priorities, and we don't want that. That is disturbing your peace of mind. That is what Community Matters is for. Third, I will delegate to you. If you have a problem being asked to do things, this isn't for you. I delegate to the board officers all the time. Keith, your secretary, he'll just say, do it yourself. Marlies is the VP. Marlies gets angry in German, so it's a whole other level of angry. You have to be willing to work with me. If that's a problem, maybe don't consider it. Auf keinen Fall. Right, Marlies? I'm so tired of hearing that. Third, and I just want to give you an idea of what board work is really like. And the best analogy I can find is climate change. We're dying. UU churches are dying. Churches everywhere are dying. It's a slow death, but there's hope, right? If we agree to change something, we'll survive. And that's a lot like board work. Let me explain. So we're a governance and policy board. Governance and policy is what you know us under, but a big part of that is open questions. And briefly, governance is what it sounds like. It's common sense limitations. It's saying no to a ministerial bronze statue of himself in the garden. That's governance. Policy is where open questions come in, and that's the important part because that's what will save us. It's the change. It's where the board works it's a collaborative effort between a minister and the senior staff and the congregation and ComH, and all the pieces fit together to decide we need to change something or we'll die. That's also board work. So just take that into consideration if that's something you want to think about joining us at some point. Where do open questions come from? The retreat. See how important that is? That's next month. That's in August. Worst case scenario, I'm not actively recruiting. Like I said, that's nom-com. We're at 8. Ask any of the math nerds in this congregation. It's probability and possibility the same thing. They're not. If we get to a 50-50 split, it's highly improbable. We'll be okay. There won't be mass hysteria. There's 8 of us. We'll be all right. Last but not least, it is hot outside. Climate change may be a hoax, but please remember to put some water out for birds and critters and such. If you're Mark Hurl, he's hosting snakes in his pool. That's above and beyond. That is up to you. Marlies, danke.
I don't usually get angry at her. That was purely hypothetical. And now I have to share some sad news about 2 members of our congregation. Dr. Muriel Kaulisar passed away last Wednesday, the 13th of July, at her retirement community in Springfield, Massachusetts, at the age of 95. She had been in hospice since April. Muriel joined MLUC in the 90s and was a brilliant and energetic member until sometime in the 2010s when she moved to Massachusetts to be near her daughter. Muriel was a retired pediatrician, and she always loved children and was very active in the church school program, especially in OWL. She was the coordinating chair for establishing our small group ministry program, and she led a small group while she was here. We have also been informed that Marian Murphy passed away this week. She was an active member of MLUC for many years and had moved to Tennessee a few years ago to be with her son Tony and his family. Marian had been placed in hospice in Glen Mills Senior Care recently. The family planned to schedule a memorial service at MLUC in the fall. At this time, please take a moment to silence your electronic devices and then join me in reciting our mission statement. Together, we transform lives through love, service, and our welcoming faith. We will light the chalice now.
Joy and grief, health and sickness, light and darkness, peace and anger, life and death, wholeness and brokenness. We each bring all of these here to this sanctuary of unity in diversity for this 1 hour of this one day, and pour them out, commingling the oil of our lives to become the flame of this chalice, the symbol of our shared living faith.
Thank you, Danton. That was amazing. Listen. Can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It calls us in the silence. It calls us through the noise and busyness of our daily lives. It calls us in the brightness of the day and the darkness of the night. It calls us in times of hope and times of despair. Listen, Can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It doesn't matter what you call the Spirit, for it has many different names and no name. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It's calling to you, it's calling to me, it's calling all of us. It's calling us to a greater wholeness, greater connection, greater service, and greater love. It is calling us to heal the brokenness in ourselves, in others, and in the world. It is calling us to live through life's pain and sorrow. It is calling us to live courageously and kindly, to speak our truth in love, and to bend the moral arc of the universe toward justice. It is calling us into community. It is calling us into a greater life together. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling us to worship.
Most of the characters in the story I'm sharing with you this morning are members of the Navajo Nation. And usually I don't tell stories set in a particular living culture that isn't mine unless that story was intentionally shared with us by someone from that culture. But I'm making an exception for this one, because the person who wrote the story did live with the Navajo for a long time. And I feel like this story really does center the perspective of a Navajo person. There we go. Or not. I don't think my clicker is working, guys. Do you want to advance it for me? I'll just tell you when. Annie's Navajo world was good. A world of rippling sand, of high copper-red bluffs in the distance, of the low mesa near her own snug hogan. She helped with chores and went to school, and in the evenings she sat at her grandmother's feet and listened to stories of times long gone. One day her grandmother said, "It's time you learned to weave, my granddaughter." Annie didn't feel ready, but that night her old grandmother called her family together. "My children," she said, "when the new rug is taken from the loom, I will go to Mother Earth." Annie knew what her grandmother meant. Her grandmother meant that she would die. The old one spoke again. "You will each choose the gift that you wish to have. What will you have, my granddaughter?" the grandmother asked. Annie looked at the grandmother's own took her teacher's shoe while she was running on the playground. But another teacher found it, and even though they knew it had been Annie who hid it, they were not angry and did not ask Annie's parents to come to the school. When she got home, Annie stopped beside the loom. The rug was now much higher than her waist. In the dim light of the next early morning, Annie crept outside to the night pen where the sheep were sleeping. She let them out. Now her family would hunt the sheep all day. This would be a day when her mother would not weave. That night, Annie curled up in her blanket, but not to sleep. When everything was still, she went to the loom. She took out several rows of weaving. When the woven rug was only as high as her waist again, she crept back to her blanket, and then she slept. The next night, Annie removed another day's weaving. In the morning, when her mother went to the loom, she looked at the weaving, puzzled. The old one looked at Annie curiously. The third night, Annie crept to the loom, but a gentle hand touched her shoulder. "Go to sleep, my granddaughter," the old one said. When morning came, her grandmother led her out to the small mesa. The old one sat, crossing her knees, folding her gnarled fingers into her lap. Annie knelt beside her. The old one looked far off toward the rim of desert where sky met sand. "My granddaughter," she said, "you have tried to hold back time. This cannot be done." The desert stretched yellow and brown away to the edge of the morning sky. The sun comes up from the edge of the earth in the morning. It returns to the edge of the earth in the evening. Earth from which good things come for the living creatures on it. Earth to which all creatures finally go. Annie picked up a handful of brown sand and pressed it against the palm of her hand. Slowly, she let it fall to earth. She understood many things. The sun rises, but it also sets. The cactus does not bloom forever. Petals dry and fall to the earth. She knew that she was a part of the earth and the things on it. She would always be part of the earth, just as her grandmother had always been, just as her grandmother always would be, always and forever. And Annie was breathless with the wonder of it. They walked back to the hogan together, Annie and the old one. Annie picked up the old weaving stick. "I am ready to weave," she said to her mother. "I will use the stick that my grandmother has given me." She knelt at the loom. She separated the warp strings and slipped the weaving stick in place as her mother had done, as her grandmother had done. She picked up a strand of gray wool and started to weave. I'd like to invite the children to join Miss Kelly outside for our class, and see you at coffee hour.
Good morning. During the next 2 months, July and August, our offering outreach partner will be Family Promise of the Main Line, formerly known as IHN. We have such a long history with this organization, and we hold a special place in our hearts for the work that it does. Why are we changing our name? Adopting the Family Promise name will allow us to take advantage of Family Promise's national profile to better serve the families in our programs. It will open doors in fundraising and in advocating on behalf of families. It will allow us to draw on the expertise of hundreds of other Family Promise affiliates to make our programs as effective as possible. And if you want to uplift your spirits, try going to their website, where you will learn how committed they are to serving families right here in our community. They provide a caring and positive environment for homeless families, while the family designs and implements a plan to break the cycle of homelessness in their lives. With the involvement of area congregations and the energy of several hundred community volunteers, Family Promise of the Main Line is dedicated to helping families strive for a better tomorrow. MLUC is one of 12 host or congregations that periodically provide homeless families with home-cooked meals and a place to sleep and feel safe. Offering outreach funds will enable IHNML to continue their vital work to connect families to community resources and empower them to achieve and maintain affordable housing. At a future service this summer, we will explore the prospect of resuming our pre-COVID practice of hosting families here at MLUC. So please be generous in supporting this unique organization in fighting homelessness. Will the ushers please come forward to collect the offering? If you are watching online, you can look at the directions on screen and text or to text, or you can access the MLUC website and click on the Give link near the top of the screen. We thank you for your gifts. Thank you for that soothing music. Candles of Community is a time in our service at Mainline Unitarian Church when we come together to share some of life's precious moments with each other. Sometimes we share with delight, sometimes with sadness. We place our utmost trust in each other that this sharing will be honored in friendship, support, and love. As we begin today, we reach out to the broader community and the world and offer our caring to all those who are suffering and dealing with oppressive heat. We wish, as we struggle with this new world reality, that nations find ways to help their people and that solutions are found to help with the climate change that we are experiencing. So we light a candle. Marilee Marshall lights a candle for Marion Murphy today, who passed away last Saturday. For Marion and Marilee and many others who knew her at MLUC, we light this candle and hold her in our hearts. And it is with utmost sadness, Cynthia Corboy writes that she lights a candle for her friend Muriel Colesar. And I also have a note from Hero, who also, I will tell you what he said in a moment. But Muriel died, as you know, on July 13th. Hero would like to add that he is so sorry to learn of Muriel's passing. She was my first SGM chair in the late 1990s. Well loved and respected, we'll always remember her. I was in that group as well. So for Muriel and all of us who mourn her passing, we hold her in our hearts. Gary Merkin writes that he is thinking of his dear friend Lori in Boston, who will undergo preventive surgery for a high risk of cancer. For Gary and Lori, we hold you in our hearts. We light a candle of concern for Marilee and Clayton Buck as they navigate current health challenges. For Marilee and Clayton, we hold you in our hearts. We light a candle of support for Jenny Campbell and Bruce Pappas as Jenny recovers from recent surgery. For Jenny and Bruce, we hold you in our hearts. Nini Ingersoll has asked to light a candle for Norm Badner. He is recovering from pneumonia. She says he is at Green Meadows Rehab Center and would welcome visitors. For Nini and Norm, we hold you in our hearts. And for all those joys and sorrows too deep to mention, we light a candle and hold you in our hearts. The blessing today is entitled A Blessing for Presence by John Donahue. So as we do the reading, so many of you like to, since this is a blessing today, you may want to either bow your heads or you can close your eyes or just rest in your place. May you awaken to the mystery of being here and enter the quiet immensity of your own presence. May you have joy and peace in the temple of your senses. May you receive great encouragement when new frontiers beckon. May you respond to the call of your gift and find the courage to follow its path. May the flame of anger free you from falsity. May warmth of heart keep your presence aflame and anxiety never linger about you. May your outer dignity mirror an inner dignity of soul. May you take time to celebrate the quiet miracles that seek no attention. May you be consoled in the secret symmetry of your soul. May you experience each day as a sacred gift, woven around the heart of wonder. We will have a period of silence. Amen. And so may it be.
Thank you again, Danton. That was a beautiful piece. Well, a couple of weeks ago, Madeline Seiko spoke about how we ask 7-year-olds what they want to be when they grow up. Well, I'm clearly a bit slow on the uptake because here I am at 57 and I'm still trying to decide what I want to be when I grow up. But I hear you ask, aren't you a lawyer or something? Yes, I am, and I've really enjoyed being one. But that is not all I am or all I want to be. And after 30 years of practicing law, I've decided I want something different, including what I might call more soul-filling work. Increasingly, I'm sensing a call to ministry, and especially to provide contemplative spiritual care for ill and dying people. And that's why, for the past 5 months, I've been training and working as a chaplain at HUP and the Pennsylvania Hospital. It has been a truly invigorating and spiritually enriching experience. I have learned so much and received so many soul gifts. One of my favorite stories in the Hebrew Bible is Samuel in the temple. According to the story, Samuel was apprenticed as a young child to Eli, the high priest. One night, Samuel and the elderly Eli are sleeping in the temple. Samuel hears a voice calling his name. Assuming Eli is crying out for him, he runs to his master and says, "Here I am, you called me?" But Eli says, "No, I didn't. Go lie down again." Samuel hears the voice a second time and again runs to Eli. But Eli says, "Really, I didn't call you. Go back to bed." Now, as the parent of 2 girls who would sometimes wake me up in the middle of the night like that, I really do feel for poor old Eli. But then it happens a third time. And when it does, Eli realizes it is God who is calling and tells Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls again, answer him." So Samuel does. And when God calls again, he responds, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." And then afterwards, Samuel grows up to be a great prophet and a religious judge and a military leader. Now, I've certainly no ambition to be any of those things. But my point is that Samuel was just 12 years old at the time. And here I am, 45 years older, and I'm just starting to hear a faint ringing in my ear. And even now, I'm wondering if it might be just the onset of tinnitus. Yes, I am a late bloomer. But what gives me comfort is that I'm exactly the same age as Reverend Dave Hunter was when he decided to leave a career in the law and become a minister. And he turned out fine, so perhaps there's hope for me too. So, what has brought me to this calling? Well, first of all, this church. 20 years ago, Sydney and I were looking for a spiritual home to raise our daughters. We wanted a place that reflected our principles and values, our belief in religious tolerance and social justice, and our broad sense of spirituality. And we found it here at MLUC. Indeed, I firmly believe that growing up in this church is a major reason why India and Lizzie are such accomplished, independent, and compassionate young women today. But this church has had a huge impact on my life, too. Here I have found a loving and nurturing community of friends and fellow journeyers. without being compelled into a binary acceptance or rejection of a specific dogma or creed, Unitarian Universalism has enabled me to develop deeper and richer perspectives on spirituality, faith, and what is truly holy for me. Over the past few years, I've also come to appreciate the spiritual growth that can arise from deep sadness and grief. I'm beginning to understand the non-duality of grief and joy, suffering and the relief of suffering, and even life and death. Or, to use biblical terms, I see in our lamentations that there are also blessings. The first thing that set me on my path was the death of my sister Roz. She was just 43 years old when she died from breast cancer. Although Roz was not religious in a traditional sense, she had a great spirit for life. She was a vibrant, engaging, and passionate woman, an inspired professor for her students, a loving partner to Liz, and a great sister to me. I miss her so much. But I'm also deeply grateful to her. Her death gave me direct insight into the realities of loss and grief, and a greater appreciation for the beauty and fragility of life. Those lessons she taught me sustain me today. I try to bring a piece of her with me into each patient encounter. And then, 4 years ago, my marriage fell apart. I hit an emotional and psychological bottom, but I also realized that some things really had to change, starting with myself. I needed to do and be different. That turning point was a deeply spiritual process for me. I developed a meditation practice and became increasingly drawn to Buddhist teachings and philosophy. Indeed, today I consider myself to be both a Unitarian Universalist and a Buddhist, or a B-U-U-D-D-H-I-S-T. But the pandemic, and especially my mother's experience, has made me reflect even more deeply about ministry and the need for spiritual care. In April 2020, my mother went into hospital for some surgery, and while there, she contracted COVID-19. This was before any vaccines or other effective treatments were available. She was also 83 years old, had several comorbidities, and was placed on oxygen treatment. Plus, as a retired doctor, she was not necessarily the most cooperative patient. Frankly, I thought she would die. And since no one could visit the hospital, I thought I would never see her again, and she would die alone. That was frightening. Blessedly, she recovered, and after 6 weeks in hospital, she came home. But that experience made me realize how fortunate I was, and what a terrible physical, emotional, and spiritual impact the pandemic has had on people. In the Buddhist tradition, the story is told that as a young prince, Siddhartha Gautama left the seclusion and artificial reality of his palace, and while out in the world he saw an old man, a sick man, and a corpse. He was deeply shocked, and those experiences forced him to confront the reality of suffering and the impermanence of life. Ultimately, this led him to the Four Noble Truths and his enlightenment as the Buddha. Now, I am certainly no Buddha. But once again, I'm a lot older than Prince Siddhartha. But the pandemic has opened my eyes to the fragility and impermanence of life and awoken greater compassion in me. And now I'm a student chaplain. So how has that experience been, and what have I learnt? Well, the first thing I'd say is that although we did have some orientation training and we attend formal classes each week, this is clinical pastoral education. So it is primarily on-the-job training. Indeed, from my first day at the hospital, I was treated as a chaplain. I introduced myself as such, and straight away was meeting with patients and their families. For all they knew, I was a fully ordained minister and had been doing this work for years. At first, that was a little intimidating, but it also gave me the opportunity to immediately step outside my comfort zone and start learning. And I've been deeply moved by the faith-filled compassion of the other student chaplains in my cohort. We're a diverse group in terms of race, ethnicity, age, religious beliefs, theological training, sexualities, and other social locations. But notwithstanding those differences, it is clear we are all answering a genuine call to ministry. As Francis David said, we do not have to think alike to love alike. All the chaplains are striving to uncover personal meaning based on our different beliefs and faith traditions, but also through our common humanity. It's not about proselytizing or trying to convert anybody. Instead, each of us tries to meet the spiritual needs of each patient as they are and wherever they may be on their own personal path. And our collective wisdom and shared experiences are different, but yet similar truths, expand all our perspectives. As for my encounters with the patients and their families, each one is different. Some are longer and more meaningful than others, and sometimes I'm more welcomed than others. But I view each visit as a chance to make a compassionate connection with another person and an opportunity for learning, self-exploration, and growth. And so far, only one patient has actually thrown me out of the room. But I am intrigued by the assumptions people make when I introduce myself as a chaplain. Many immediately assume that I must be a Christian, or at least a traditional theist. For example, one of my patients was a retired university professor who was in the final stages of a terminal cancer. When I entered his room, he welcomed me, but told me he was an atheist, and so we probably wouldn't get very far. I responded with something I once heard Reverend Stephen Papa say, although I think he may have borrowed the line from Rabbi Levi Zitzchak. Okay, tell me about the God you don't believe in, because I probably don't believe in him either. We laughed. And then we had a meaningful conversation about his life, his marriage, his illness, and his impending death. He said he had no fear of death, which he analogized to the oblivion of anesthesia. Indeed, he was in a lot of physical pain and was ready to die. But he was deeply concerned that his wife might think he had given up too easily and feel abandoned. So we talked that through. That encounter taught me that everyone has existential concerns and needs spiritual support, but in varied ways and through different theological lenses. Indeed, sometimes the patient may not even recognize them as spiritual issues. As a chaplain, my role is simply to be there for the patient and their families, to honor their personal beliefs, cultural heritage, and lived experiences, follow their lead, and then support them in any way they want to be supported. For example, one morning I was called to the emergency department at Pennsylvania Hospital, where an elderly Hispanic woman had just been admitted. Earlier that morning, she had had a cerebral hemorrhage due to a burst aneurysm. The bleed was extensive and almost certainly fatal. The patient was originally from Puerto Rico and was the matriarch of a large family. She had 7 children and numerous grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The patient and her family were Roman Catholic. Over 20 members of her extended family had already arrived at the hospital and were in the waiting room. 3 of the patient's children were in her room, and I offered to say a prayer with them before she was moved to the ICU. But they asked if other family members could come and join in the prayer as well. Now, normally there are strict limits on the number of people who can be in a room, but the medical staff and I realized how important it was, both culturally and spiritually, for the whole family to be with the patient for that prayer. So we made it happen, and I ended up saying a Christian prayer to a room of over 25 people. For me, it was a deep honor to say that prayer and to hold the space for them at that critical time. Religious, cultural, and social location humility is critical to being a chaplain. I try to bring a mindset of humility and respect to every interaction I have with my patients. I recognize that the other person's social location, their race, gender, culture, religious beliefs, personal background, or other personal characteristics will be different from mine own, and hence, so may be their truth. And by doing that, I can more effectively minister to their needs. I also appreciate that I can only do the best I can. I simply cannot fill the same role as someone from their own cultural or religious background. But typically, that's not what people are looking for. Instead, they just need someone who can hold the space, be in the moment for and with them. As a chaplain, my most important social location characteristic is my humanity. The most effective way to minister to a diverse population is simply to be authentic, be present, and be human. And cultural and social location humility is part of a broader humility about my role and my limitations. As a lawyer, like doctors, engineers, and many other professionals, I was trained to be an expert in my field, and based on that knowledge, to advise people, find solutions, and ultimately fix problems. But that is not my role as a chaplain. I am not there to advise or fix. My role is to accompany, to bear witness to suffering, not to provide answers. Through attentive silence, active listening, and open questions, I try to allow the wisdom of the other person to emerge. Silence alone has soul-healing power. Often the less said, the better. And I have to resist the urge to rush to fill the silence. But as you can imagine, that's not so easy for me. I'm definitely a work in progress. Dr. Balfour Mount, who is considered the father of palliative care in North America, has said that the effectiveness of healing is determined by our openness, self-awareness, and capacity for radical presence. But to be radically present, you have to be authentic and bring your complete self to the encounter. The key is not to reject what you already know or the skills you already have, but rather to integrate them with new skills and techniques. Similarly, you can't pretend to be something you're not. You bring your whole self, all your training, your skills, your beliefs, your personality to the patient interactions. And as Carl Jung famously said, you cannot apply kindness and understanding to others if you have not applied it to yourself. To be authentically present, you have to know yourself. Self-awareness, self-compassion, self-forgiveness, and self-care are bedrock necessities to be able to extend compassion to others. Unless you know yourself, have made peace with yourself, and also regularly take time for self-care, you cannot be authentically present. Indeed, I'm recognizing that chaplaincy is largely an inside job, a ministry of self-discovery and self-liberation as much as a ministry to others. Finally, I'm coming to recognize the importance of honoring the inherent worth, dignity, and yes, sacredness of every patient. Illness, hospitalization, and ultimately dying involve loss of control, privacy, autonomy, physical function, and cognitive abilities. In addition, the patient frequently suffers a loss of self-worth and their perceived purpose in life. And that spiritual suffering is often even greater than the physical suffering. As a chaplain, my role includes helping patients rediscover their own sense of self, the purpose and meaning in their lives, and their inherent worth and dignity. I try to remember that each of us is as complete as we are. Yes, each of us is impermanent, but each of us also has Buddha nature. And ultimately, we are all one through interbeing. We all suffer, and the suffering of one is the suffering of all. I also try to look past the person's disease and recognize that that too is impermanent and certainly does not define who they are. The patient is Ms. Smith, not the glioblastoma in room 9. I strive to see the patient holistically, not exactly as they were before their illness, but still that same whole spiritual person who now happens to be ill. And the truth is that the inevitable reality of sickness and death can point to deeper spiritual truths, including how to live more fully as long as we are here in this world. As Psalm 90 verse 12 says, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." Or from the perspective of Buddhist meditation, we are all taking our last breaths. Some are just not counting yet. In the Buddhist tradition, we also talk about how prajna, or insight, and karuna, or compassion, are the two wings of the Dharma. Like a bird that needs two wings to fly, insight and compassion are both necessary to become a bodhisattva. Now, I am certainly no bodhisattva. I'm not even a fully fledged minister. But I think my experience as a chaplain is helping me become a Dharma fledgling, one who at least aspires to fly upwards and inwards towards Buddha nature. And for that, this juvenile bird is deeply grateful for my nest here at MLUC. So what's next? Well, I'm very much still in the discernment process, as it's called. After I complete my chaplaincy experience next month, I'll be going back to Ireland to take a Master of Philosophy degree in Comparative Theologies and Interfaith Relations at Trinity College Dublin. That's a one-year program. And while I'm in Ireland, I plan to take additional courses in end-of-life spiritual care from a Buddhist perspective. And then after that, well, I'm not sure. But don't worry, I'll be back to MLUC from time to time. You can't get rid of me that easily. And my ultimate goal is to be fellowshipped through the UUA and become an ordained minister. But that will take a few years. But if and when I am ordained, I truly hope it will be by this congregation. I would love to be ordained out of MLUC, my spiritual home. Amen. May it be so, and blessed be. Blessed is your path that you travel. Blessed is your body that carries you. Blessed is your heart that hears the call. Blessed is your mind that discerns the direction. Blessed is the gift you will receive by going. Truly blessed is the gift you will become on the way. May you go forth in peace. May you go forth with courage. May you go forth with blessings. May it be so.